Hi, welcome to our latest installment, our last installment actually, of our real firm stories in innovation in assurance services. My name is Matt Towers, CPA.com. I'm product lead for assurance. And I'm joined today, excited to be joined today by Jonathan Kraftchick from Bekaert. Jonathan, welcome. Thanks for joining.
Thanks, Matt. Good to be here. I didn't know this is the last one, so I gotta bring my A game.
Yeah, right. Save the best for last. That's what we're going with? So we've been talking for several weeks now about innovation, and particularly in the audit and assurance world, of course. So I think it'd be good, before we dig in on any specific subjects, to just have you briefly introduce yourself for everybody and talk a little bit about your role, and then we'll dive a little bit more into specific innovation related subject matter.
Yeah, sure. So I'm a partner with Bekaert. We're a mid-sized firm in primarily the Southeast, but kind of expanding our footprint even recently. And so throughout COVID, which has been exciting for us. My role here is, honestly, it's really neat. And I'm really grateful for what I get to do here. But mainly my role is to oversee anything as it relates to innovation. The way we define that, I'm sure we'll get into a little bit later on in the podcast. But for me, I came up through the audit side. So I'm a CPA and been in public accounting for most of my career. It was a bit of a career switch, and have been doing it forever. Came up through audit and then got into overseeing a lot of our methodology and process. And then, of course, technology and process have kind of become almost inseparable. And so kind of went the technology route the past few years, and then have recently started doing a lot more of that similar work firm-wide as opposed to just audit. And so, which is fun, and I'm getting to know all sorts of our services, including our internal services too. So exciting stuff, and certainly happy to talk about this topic.
It's actually good perspective too, because I would imagine in your role, Jonathan, you have, with the background in assurance and audit, but now having more of a wide swath of firm-wide innovation, that it gives you the ability, when you see a particular technology and you learn more about it, you might have a better idea of how it might fit or what might make sense in terms of its impact elsewhere in the business, which, I don't know, in my experience talking to firms a lot, there tends to be unintentional siloing that goes on, where one group does their thing and another does their thing. And so to have something that's more higher view, that's dedicated to innovation, is pretty cool.
Yeah, it's really true. One of the things that I've probably been most surprised at is we do silo not just how we work, but also the technologies that we use that are really many times trying to accomplish the same thing. And so many times when I'm listening to the other service lines talk about issues they're having, I'm like, we've been using a tool that solves that in audit for years. Or as I learned about the technologies, particularly in tax, they have a lot more technology than audit does, or number of technologies than audit does. And like, man, I wish we would have known about that. We could have been using this in audit for many, many years. So exciting stuff. And it's cool to marry the two for sure, to get rid of this, or get rid of the silos.
Right. Well, if you think about it from a client's perspective, you are at one firm. They don't care what group is doing what. So it would be a good thing if you had all these one-off things for the tax group that affect them, and they have to use different technology for what they think is the same thing, like how they get you files or something like that. So it can be, from their perspective anyway, it can be kind of challenging, I would think. Could be. So let's talk a little bit more about your role with innovation, and I don't know, any particular projects or things you're involved in that might be, in particular, of course, we're focused on audit and assurance services, things that would be of interest to the crowd that's listening in today.
Yeah. Well, you're catching me on a great day for audit innovation. Actually, in about 2 hours from now, we're running a process optimization workshop with our audit team. And so I'll talk about that in just a second. But as far as how we define innovation, this is something that I've really just not enjoyed the buzzword of innovation all that much. I was telling our now CEO that innovation is probably the least innovative word to describe innovation. And I still kind of believe that there's a lot of debate as to what it actually means. And people like to fold their arms and say, well, that's not innovation. That's just, that's just continuous improvement, or that's, this is really innovative. But I'm like, I don't know if that really is. We should have done that 20 years ago. So the way I go about it now is, maybe there is no definition of innovation. This is innovative for us right now on this project. And if we're not doing it and we should have been doing it, whether or not we call it innovation is kind of beside the point. And so the way I go about it, it is implementation of new ideas that create value, and specifically that address problems or opportunities that we should have been involved with or need to keep our eye on. And so that's a lot of what we do. As far as what we're working on in audit right now, we are a funding firm for Dynamic Audit Solution, and certainly excited about that. I'm on their advisory group, and a handful of others participate deeply. And so I actually just got off a call right now we're planning a more in-depth on-point PCR pilot. And so working with a lot of our internal folks to get that going. This is one of the interesting pieces, though, even though it's technically audit for Dynamic Audit Solution, on-point PCR, we're pulling in our tax department a lot to be part of that pilot. We're also pulling in some of our associates in our overseas spots in India, specifically to help us out a little bit too. So I'm kind of excited about the collaboration that's beyond just the A&A department. Anyway, that's Dynamic Audit Solution, which is its own thing. As far as things that we're working on specific to our firm, this workshop is going to be really fun. Today, we'll really just work on the problem identification. So we've got our index of required steps and work papers that are going to be in every single engagement for an audit. And we're just going to go through, and we've got some specific goals out of it from our audit service line leader. But we're going to go through and today for a few hours, just spend time talking about the problems, and auditors love that. And so we will spend a lot of time just not coming up with solutions, but just identifying the problems. Our next workshop, or our next session in that workshop, will then be identifying the ones that we're actually going to try and tackle. And then we'll go to the solution side and then flush them out for this busy season. So this is going to be a routine that we get in for all of our service lines and our internal processes for shared services. But for audit, this is, we've done things like this before, but we finally kind of have a framework to do this routinely, and working really hand in hand with our service line leaders to identify high level goals, and then get really specific with solutions toward the end, but only after we have a really good problem worth solving. So today, I don't know what's going to happen. I just know it's going to be good, and it's going to be fun, and we're going to get accountants to be creative.
Yeah, and you're going to get them in the room together talking about all their problems. So have fun with that, Jonathan.
Yeah, auditors are great at finding issues with things. And so I have no problem, or I have no issue wondering if they're going to be not participating, but it is remote. And so we do have some cool tools that we'll be using for the first time for this group on to do remote design workshops, which is a little different than maybe what we're used to in the room and having nice meals and whatever else together, but it's still engaging and fun.
This is the kind of activity to me that transcends firm size and firm dynamic, because no matter who you are, you really shouldn't be trying to solve a problem until you really understand it well. And it'd be interesting to know, do you have any plans to try to get client feedback infused? So the client's perspective on how they perceive things and what they think might be problematic?
What a debate. So I was actually just talking to another guy in my department about this. So in the design world, obviously there's the user is kind of the whole thing. And in product design, that makes so much sense. In audit, we use the word user very differently than maybe the owner of a smartphone or something like that. And so is it the user of the financial statements? Is it our client? Is it the public? Is it the firm? And this is hard. So we actually have a separate project. We're early in this, and I think accounting firms in general are early in this. So client experience is something we take really seriously. We're doing a lot of that empathy mapping as a separate project right now to look at it beyond just audit. And I think that's one of the things that maybe mid-size and firms and up, and maybe firms of all sizes struggle with. But those silos you were talking about at the beginning, really show their stripes as you say, I'm an auditor from day one, or I'm a tax person from day one, as opposed to kind of the general approach. The debate we get in is when you're doing kind of these innovation workshops, and you want to design it for the user, is that the client who really doesn't see anything to do with our, like, do they care what our audit methodology is, or really do they want the report in an easy way at a price they like? Quality is kind of assumed. Or is the user the reviewer? Is the user the preparer? And so we're debating some of that right now. I think a lot of times it's going to depend on why we're having the workshop in the first place. The take we're leaning to is, if you keep the client in mind first, that will then have an impact on how the associates respond, and that will then have an impact on the firm and the financial results, of course. So sure, we're trying to go in that order, but defining that client and how much they really care about what our sampling methodology is one that maybe in Silicon Valley they don't really spend time talking about as much. So differentiating product design from process redesign is something we're wrestling with right now.
Well, you sounds like you have a fun time in store for you today, and I'm sure you have plans so that you guys don't feel like you're boiling the ocean trying to solve all the world's problems around all this. I want to circle back for a second, though, to something that struck a chord with me is when you said innovation is a buzzword, and I agree. Kind of like these things lose their meaning. And when you made reference to your involvement with the dynamic audit solution too, one of the things that I'm trying to help people understand is we've been talking for a while about this idea of transforming the audit, right? And so I kind of think along the lines of, with innovation, for instance, the idea is it's different, a little bit different from the standpoint of, instead of trying to find a way to do the things you're doing differently, better, optimizing, whatever, it's more like, let's just look at what we're doing, and should we be doing different things to arrive at a better result, or at a better result in a better way, possibly. And so the word transform to me is another one that's kind of like, I mean, what am I, a chameleon? I don't know what this means, right? So I've been kind of thinking of it from a standpoint of how a firm goes from what they're used to, right? The way audit methodology has been, it hasn't really changed tremendously in a long time. It's kind of been what it's been for a while. So I guess I'm wondering what your take is on the idea of transformation, and if you have any insights or thoughts just from your experience working in dynamic audit solution around what does it really mean?
Oh man, we do talk about that at the dynamic audit solution meetings that I attend pretty much the whole time. I think when the idea was initially launched, it was a white paper that really hit people well, and it was, we've got to do something. And we hear a lot, the audit hasn't changed since it was first put into place in the 19 whatever it was. And there's a lot of truth to that. I personally think it has changed a good deal. I think at its core we're still trying to do similar things, but the way we're going about it from when I started my career versus now is very different. I do think we maybe don't take credit for the changes that take place. I'm not saying we need to go slower or just be comfortable where we are, but as far as transforming the audit, I'm a huge fan of that as a goal. But before you can really do that, I think you have to know why you want to transform. And I think the dynamic audit solution's done a good job articulating the need for that. In my opinion, and this is a little outside of the scope of DAS, if we're not getting closer to the continuous audit, if we're not getting closer to the real-time data ingestion and analysis, then you have to have a really compelling argument as to why that's a project worth focusing on. And that ROI just has to be there almost immediately. I think what DAS is trying to do, even though it may not be the stated implication, is that is what they're trying to do. They're trying to marry up systems. They're trying to get a methodology that makes sense to be able to do things in a more real-time, accessible, and collaborative world, as opposed to where we are right now, which is, kind of mashing together different tools and taken the best of breed approach, or taken the ecosystem approach of tools that are just really hard to switch from. And I'm very honest when I say I really have just such deep respect for all of our big vendors. And I feel good relationships with them and love where they're headed. Whether or not I define it as transformative, I don't know. We hear in 5 years, you won't recognize, the profession. And maybe that's true. I think 5 is a number that gets thrown out there a lot because I don't know why. We have 5 fingers. It's long enough away to know we don't have to be really accountable for what happened 5 years ago when I said that thing. What I try to say is more like, in 2 years, where do we want to be? And I think that's where DAS has done a good job, as have our other vendors. But DAS has really done a good job saying, in 2 years or in 3 years, we're going to be exactly here. And everything we're doing is very specific to get to those goals. And so I guess I'm rambling a little bit, but to me, when we look back on when DAS is out there in the marketplace, and probably the other vendors too, and say, all right, where were we however many years ago? Have we transformed? It's going to be hard to actually say yes to that because we just don't like saying yes to that. But if I'm honest, I think that we've been transforming the whole time. We're just now at a really neat point where data analysis is getting to be very important, where clients are asking for a lot more from the audit, where, the tools honestly are getting good, where firms are figuring out how to take credit for using AI inside the audit without fear of regulator pushback. And so I think it's a perfect storm that's ready to truly even maybe be called transformative, whether or not we even know what that looks like. So the goal is really more important than the actual definition, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's well, I think the recent updates with SAS 142 helps tremendously as it relates to, the standards are essentially acknowledging, the technology has evolved and such. So and I know I did put you on the spot with the question a bit. The point of talking, I think, about transforming the audit and audit of the future and these kinds of things is that I think there are kind of these 2 paths that come into mind. There's a path that says, hey, look, we have a way we do things. Let's look at all the technology that's out there that can make that way better. And then the DAS approach is a little bit different because it says, you know what, let's look at what can technology do to change the foundation of how we do things. And so it's more like, let's to some extent, let's blow it up and let's build it again with technology sort of ingrained into it in a way that can help guide the auditor in a logical and smart way, and using, again, AI and machine learning as part of that process. So the thought that it could actually have implications on things like the timing of when certain parts of the engagement happen, or other data points that maybe weren't considered. I don't know. It's just very interesting and very cool to be involved in those things.
It is. And for me, I think what this project's done, at least for our firm and the other firms I talk to that are participating, is we kind of realized if we want to move forward beyond just, hey, I found this new tool, we should use this new tool, or beyond, hey, I think instead of sampling this many, we should be able to only sample this many. Those are really important, and those have year 1 benefits.
Yep.
But in talking through what it's going to take to implement something like DAS, it's been really interesting to see, wow, we've got a lot of work to do before we can even consider adoption. And so whether that means we've got to centralize more of the work, we've got to figure out our trial balance, for example, to say, could we even become so standardized with the way we group our trial balance to be able to fully utilize DAS? Can we, if we're auditing in the cloud, what's that mean for where our people are auditing from? Can we use India just as easily as we could? And I think grappling with 142, like you're saying, there's a lot of work that the firms have to do to be able to even get on the transformation train. And that's what I think has been really beneficial, is it's fast forward a lot of conversations that realistically we should have been having all along. And I think the other vendors are and have been doing a lot of that as well. It's just the voice has become certainly amplified the past couple of years.
Yeah, absolutely. We certainly see change management as being an important part of our role. CPA.com, like helping organize and make sure firms are aware of what it takes to really make a pretty significant change, like it would be implementing DAS and so forth. So, I guess I'll steer away and kind of ask one final question, Jonathan. You've been great in the hot seat today, by the way. Thank you. It's mainly just I'd like to know if you have any sort of final thoughts around how firms can infuse innovation into their audit or assurance services, even if it's just one small idea. I think a lot of times the smaller the idea, the better, because it's something that if a firm just makes a small change, it could actually have a nice ripple effect. And I'm wondering in particular if there's anything that comes to mind that maybe transcends, again, firm size. Could be something that most firms would probably find valuable. So it's a tall order I'm asking from you, but I'm wondering what your thoughts are.
Just one. So yeah, there's a lot that I think firms can do to just start. And it really is just that, just do something. I mean, I've sat through, I cannot tell you how many classes on here's how to launch innovation in your company, or here's how to foster a culture of innovation. And those are really important topics that really can't be understated, but a lot of times it does feel that they're built for either non-accounting firms or very product specific or almost retail feelings to it, or very large companies. So if I think about a small firm or a small company, or even a mid-sized firm like us, just choose one thing, one problem that you have. Find a problem that you've been rumbling about for years, and then get some passionate people in the room in a concentrated effort. Remote is just fine. We use a tool called Mural to do a lot of really cool whiteboarding, but Miro is just as good. There's a ton of them out there. And just get people saying, all right, let's really define this problem. Why is this a problem? Why hasn't it been fixed? And go down and root cause, and then just brainstorm solutions for that one problem. And I think once you do that, it's really contagious, and people see it done once and they want to do it again. And then that just kind of builds on itself. So all in all, I would say if you're a team of 5, if you're a team of 5,000, find a huge problem, commit, 10 or so people to solving it, and just do it. And even if it flops, the process itself will prove itself. And so to me, that's how we've been doing it for the past couple of years, is we're addressing specific problems. The other side of this, at least for us, is you always got to have your radar out there to see what tech is coming down the pipeline, and always be piloting. I kind of find those to be a little bit separate. That's more on the true innovation side. But for us, it's really for just, doing something. It's all about solving problems. And so
That makes sense.
Find a problem and then go nuts on it. Find a great solution and go to the next and go to the next.
It makes sense. And people like to feel like they're being involved in something that matters. And I think you're right about the balance, because sometimes you have to better understand the technology that's out there to even better understand what's possible, because it kind of gets you to maybe expand your thinking around it. And yeah, you're right. Every firm can look at any one problem and say, let's get serious about this. And it does have a ripple effect. People get excited to be involved, and you're right. Win or lose, people realize, look, this is worth investing the time in. So good. I really appreciate that suggestion and appreciate your time today, Jonathan. Thank you so much for joining me, and thank you everybody for listening in. I really appreciate it. And if you have missed any of our previous interviews, you're welcome to go out to our YouTube channel, CPA.com's YouTube channel. I also encourage everybody to subscribe to our LinkedIn, so that way you're notified for future interviews like this one. And again, thanks so much. Thanks, Jonathan. Have a good day.
Thanks, Matt.